And just so you know, Becky, I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but you're a little bit spotty. But for people to know, I'll be interviewing each of our panelists today, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. And just so I think Merav is joining us from Florida. Linda, are you in DC, Washington, DC, where you live?
Yes,
And Mariana, are you in Lima?
I am. Yeah.
All right, nice. And I'm in California where I live, so we are covering a wide region. And Becky is in Michigan where she lives.
I am. So welcome everyone to this very special webinar event. We're going to get started soon. As you're coming in today, we hope that you'll take a moment to let us know in the chat where you're calling in from today. And if you happen to be attending this event as part of your professional development, we would also love to know what organization you represent so that we can give you a shout out. So hello to you in Sweden, in London, in Orange, California. Thank you for being here. Welcome in Baltimore, Madison, Nashville. Wow, these are coming in fast. So thank you to all of you for investing this time with us today. As we begin, I do want to let you know about a few technical considerations for today's event. One is that we do have closed captioning available. So if you would appreciate this event more with the captions turned on, that is something you can control on your side. We invite you to turn those captions on for today's event. We also are recording today's event, and you will be able to access this recording later to share with your friends, colleagues, or watch it again for your own learning. Finally, we want to invite you to use the chat throughout today's event to capture any insights, any questions, and we will have a Q&A with all of our panelists and our author toward the end of the hour. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we will be addressing them as we go. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to introduce my friend and client, Eduardo Briceño. He's a global keynote speaker and a facilitator who guides many of the world's leading companies in cultivating cultures of learning and high performance. His TED Talk and his related TEDx Talk, the two talks together have been viewed more than 9 million times. And as I mentioned earlier, Eduardo is the author of the new book, The Performance Paradox, Turning the Power of Mindset into Action, that launches in just a couple of weeks on September 5th. It was also selected as a must-read by the Next Big Idea Club, and we know that the ideas in this book will be making a tremendous impact for months and years to come. So we are thrilled to have the chance to learn with you today, Eduardo, and with your special guests. So as we begin, I would love to have you share with our listeners to frame up today's conversation, what is the performance paradox and why did you decide to write this book?
Absolutely. Thank you, Becky. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It's so cool to see everybody coming from so many different places. And thank you especially, to Linda, Merav, and Mariana for being here. Three amazing leaders and performers and learners and teachers that inspire me. So I really look forward to our conversation. And this will be a really packed hour. I could easily interview them for well over an hour each, and I have before. In this book, when I was doing my research, I interviewed over 100 people that were kind of either that I knew or that were introduced to me as amazing learners and performers. And the three guests that we have today are three of those people who are featured in the book. And I wrote the book because I realized at some point when I started working with Carol Dweck at Stanford, who coined the term growth mindset and has led the research on that, I learned how my fixed mindset was getting in the way of my goals professionally and personally throughout my career. But I also learned that along with a growth mindset, which is the belief that I can change and that other people can change, along with that belief that we can change, we also need to know how to change. We need to know the learning strategies that are effective, which are different than just working hard to execute. And that's the performance paradox. The performance paradox is a counterintuitive phenomenon that if we only focus on getting things done as best as we know how, trying to minimize mistakes, our performance suffers. So if we focus only on performance, our performance goes down. It maximizes performance in the immediate, bless you, Mariana, but we miss out on increasing our performance over time and really reaching completely new levels of achievement, both personally and professionally. And we'll hear that today from our guests. Now, The solution, the book, chapter 1 is called the performance paradox. It's about the issue, the challenge, and then chapters 2 through 14 are about the solutions, which are to embed not just the performance zone, not just being focused on getting things done, but also embed the learning zone into our lives and our work. And the learning zone is when we leap beyond the known and when we engage in learning strategies like asking questions, soliciting feedback, experimenting, looking at mistakes. And we'll hear how our guests today do that for themselves and in the organizations that they lead. Now, I will interview them in the order that they appear in the book. In the book, part 1 is for individuals and about the foundational ideas. Part 2 is how to overcome the paradox in teams and organizations. And part 3 is about how to perform, what to do in the performance zone and how to affect impact. And I'll interview the guests in the order that they appear in the book. For today's guests, Linda and Merav appear in chapter 7. And in chapter 7, I introduce a framework that I'm just going to share with you really quickly for context. And this is called the growth propeller. And the growth propeller are the 5 things that enable any of us to be great learners and performers. So in the middle, there's our purpose and our identity. And the blades are our beliefs, like growth mindset, for example, is one of the key beliefs. Our belief about whether people are fixed or naturals or whether they can change over time. And then our habits, both reactive habits when we encounter challenges and proactive habits to drive our growth proactively. And then our community, the people around us, who to surround ourselves with and what our relationships are with them, what kind of collaboration we have with them. So it's just a little bit of context. But I want to jump into the interviews because that's my favorite part, and we have so much to learn from these 3 guests. So we'll start with Linda. Thank you, Linda, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
For just a little bit of introduction of Linda, for people to have a sense of how much Linda has achieved. She has gone through so much struggle in her life, and she has started over several times in her life. But to give you a sense of her achievement, she founded a construction, like a commercial construction professional services company called Rand Construction, and has led it for over 30 years. And it's become a very successful company, has over $400 million in annual revenues. It operates in 26 states, and it has been recognized as one of the best places to work by several organizations, including the Washington Post and Washington Business Journal. And Linda herself has been recognized by many organizations as a top leader. And she's served, among many things, she's stood on many boards, and she has served as chair of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. She also, something that I love is she has founded and funded programs to support women at George Washington University and at Harvard to prepare women to serve on boards. That's one of the many ways that she contributes to her community. But sometimes when we look at people who, whether they're great performers in sports or in the performance arts or business leaders like Linda, we only see their achievements, right? And that can give us a sense that people were naturals, right? That Linda is like that because that's how she was born, and that can foster a fixed mindset. But what we'll have the opportunity to do today is to look at the process, right? What are some of the things just a little bit, because we don't have a lot of time, but what are some of the things that Linda has done throughout her career to really develop herself and to achieve such extraordinary success? So Linda, I want to start your parents were very important to you. They were great parents. Your dad was a German immigrant. Your mother was an Italian immigrant. And you've learned a lot from them. Your dad had 2 kind of principles that he always evoked and that resonated with you. And I think you have kind of lived them throughout your life and continue to. What were those 2 principles?
So my father came to this country in 1925 when he didn't like what was going on in Germany. And he was going to be a doctor. He was going to go to medical school, but he actually went to engineering school and ended up with 18 patents in automotive engineering. So he was very precise. And on weekends, he would take me around to he worked for Chrysler Corporation. He'd take me around to the vendors, people who were doing work for Chrysler. And he'd say, you see this? This is 5/8 of an inch off. Good enough is never good enough. You can never be 5/8 of an inch off. And the other thing he always emphasized to me as I was growing up is be proud, leave things better than you found them.
Great. So I think that those are two kind of examples of fostering a growth mindset that we can always improve and always get better. And I think your dad came to this country, his family sent them to be a doctor, and he became an engineer because your aunt, who was in the US and was his benefactor, kind of said, hey, there's this new industry emerging. You should check it out. And so he changed his plans, and it's something that we'll hear today. A lot of us have kind of changed plans and taken advantage of opportunities, and that has involved kind of growth in a new area. Now, your parents also had, I think, a different vision for your life than what ended up being your life and your vision. And I think, if I understand correctly, early in your life and in your early adulthood, you live your parents' vision for you, not your vision for you. And I wonder if there was a pivotal moment in your life where you started having your own vision of yourself. And I wonder where that vision has continued to evolve since.
So because I was so grateful of my father's mentoring, I got the disease to please. And it has served me very well as a service provider professionally, but it hurt me in my personal life at first. So my identity was always about accomplishing things, move the needle. I was in the cool kids club in high school. I was a leader in college. But my mother said, you should be either a school teacher or a nurse. And not liking the sight of blood, I became a school teacher. And my father said, you should marry well and have 2 near perfect children. So I did that. And ironically enough, I married a doctor who was very sick emotionally, and I didn't realize it because I was so young. And I eventually, in my disease to please, became a battered wife. It was then at 32 years old, I left my family, my home, with my 3-year-old and 2-year-old to start over.
Wow. And so you started over, your teacher credential had expired, so you couldn't go back to teaching. You had to get a job because you needed to provide for your children. You found a job as an administrative assistant at KPMG. Then soon you were promoted to an executive assistant, then director of marketing. And one of the things that was a period of great learning for you, and your whole career has been. But something that strikes me is that you learned a lot during that time, and somebody in the same situation might not have learned as much. So what were some of the things that you did that allowed you to learn so much and to develop yourself when you started your career at KPMG?
So I have never had a business class. I've never had an accounting class. I sit on corporate boards, and I had to learn everything myself. So the teacher, I taught school for 3 years, English and American history, had to become the student. And I was so curious about what it takes to be successful in business. I'd seen my father be very successful, but times were changing. And I was the first woman in either of my families to go to college, and the first woman to get a master's degree, and the first woman to get a divorce. And so I had a lot of firsts. And what I did at KPMG was I really watched the masters. It was like an MBA for me. I was so curious about what makes people successful, because they were all smart, but they didn't all rise up through the ranks. And I was acutely observant, and I asked a lot of questions. I was very curious about what it takes to get to the corner office.
And you asked a lot of questions, and some of those questions, as I've heard you, you solicited a lot of feedback, and you learned who to solicit feedback from. And that was important to you. And something that I learned from you is why soliciting feedback might be particularly important for women. Can you comment on that? And why it was important for you?
Sure. So when there were so few women in the workplace or in powerful positions, men didn't actually know how to give feedback to women. And they were afraid in that era of that women would either cry or yell, and they didn't like either outcome. So I learned that if I said to somebody, Joe, I really would appreciate your being my friend. I really need your help. Tell me how I could have done this better. It gave Joe permission to tell me the truth because I solicited it. I asked him for the truth. And I still do that to this day.
That's fantastic. And it is something that I consistently see with top performers, people very skilled, like everybody here today, soliciting feedback all the time. So I ask people to think about, are you soliciting feedback all the time? Now, last question I have for you is, your mother was extremely good at developing her social networks, and that's something that you learned from her. And one of the ways that you have applied that is you put together a group of women, 27 years ago, that was originally 6 women. Now I think it's about 18. You meet about once a quarter, and that's become important to you and to the members of that group. So what are kinds of things you do when you get together, and why is that network of women important to you and to the other members?
So 26 years ago, or actually 38 years ago, when I started my first construction company, I had no female mentors. There were no women in commercial real estate who were successful. And by 26 years ago, there were some women who were starting to come up in the commercial real estate world. And my best friend and I decided we were going to get these women together, and we were going to teach each other how to mentor each other. We were going to give advice. We were going to get advice. We were going to help each other personally. We were going to help each other professionally. And we were going to be a group that learned from each other, supported each other, and helped each other grow personally and professionally. To this day, at the holiday party, I make everyone go around the table and say what they have been grateful for that somebody at that table did for them, and what they did to help someone else.
Fantastic. And I know that one of the many things that people have contributed to you in that group was when you got breast cancer, they took amazing care of you. They drove you, they stayed with you, they cooked, they brought you food the next day. And that's just one example of how, you support one another. Thank you so much, Linda. I look forward to continuing the conversation afterwards when the 4 of us are together. But thank you for being here, and we'll continue the conversation. I'm going to ask everybody here today to actually answer a question on the chat window. And the chat window is, the question is, if I could get better at anything, what would I improve? Whether personally or professionally, what would that be for you if you could improve anything? And that's for everybody who is attending. Oh, I put this into the host window. So let me put it for everyone. I'm going to put the question here. If I could get better at anything, what would I improve? How to handle conflict, writing skills, public speaking, goal setting, empathy, focus, leading, not managing, journaling, conversation skills. Awesome. So what I want you to think about as we go about this session, and from what you heard from Linda, is, are you regularly engaging in the learning zone with regards to that? Like if it's calmness or connecting or not pleasing everyone all the time, what are you doing other than just doing, right? And just continuing to get things done in order to get better at that? Because the performance paradox is that if we just focus on getting things done, we won't improve. That actually does work when we are novices and just starting out, but then we stagnate once we become proficient. And you heard from Linda what kinds of things she does, right? Like soliciting feedback, like putting together that network of women, and many other things that she does to lead in her organization and to lead a culture of learning, which we'll get into with Merab. So Merab, welcome. To introduce Merab, She is the founder and CEO of Versatile, which is also in the construction industry. It's a construction technology industry, and they use artificial intelligence to get information. They have one of their products is they have a device that goes on the hooks of cranes, and this device can look at the entire job sites, get lots of information, and use that information to make sites more efficient and safer for people. So she started in 2016, and the effectiveness of the product and their solution has enabled them to raise over $100 million. It's a super high growth company, and we'll talk about some of that. And one thing that Merav shares with Linda and with Mariana is that at some points they have all been teachers. And I think that great leaders are great teachers, right? Because they help their people develop. And these women have happened to have some experience in classrooms as well. So Merav, welcome. Thank you for being here. I would love to start with kind of what is Versatile's mission, and why is that work that Versatile does important to you?
Great question, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited and inspired listening to the other speakers, by the way, and reading about the kind of the other perspectives in the book as well. So thank you again for having me. Versatile's mission is simple, and it's driven from the vision, which is control over what we fondly call the most fragmented and non-structured manufacturing process on earth, which is construction. So the mission is really empowerment. And we believe that if we can empower builders to make better decisions, to actually use the data and the power that we give them to just literally be a better version of themselves, believing in them, believing they're already amazing, then we're creating a better industry and we're making a huge difference. And that's what's driving me, really, where it comes to technically doing things that everyone around me, well-wishing, by the way, told me was impossible and that I probably shouldn't even start. That's how you get driven to learn and get things done when probably everyone else around you believes they're impossible to actually achieve.
Fantastic. Now, I have heard, I don't know actually if Versatile has values, but some values that I have heard from you in prior conversations is that you value customer centricity, so really focusing on the customer needs and learning from customers.
Yes.
Also joy, you want to foster a culture of joy, and you want to foster a culture of learning. And I wonder why those things are important to you, and in particular, why is a culture of learning important to you?
Sure, and I'll say as we grew super fast, there are more that I want to do where it comes to our culture, our values, the way we operate. So I don't believe we're ever done. I'll probably say we're 2% done, as in most things. I believe most of the work is ahead of us. Learning is so important because it's so easy to categorize things as failures, and people are afraid of failures. One of my very early mentors, speaking of learning, quoted Nelson Mandela when he said, I never fail. I either win or I learn. And I adopted that. And my version of it is failure is only one if we fail to learn. And with that, you take the most horrible things and turn them into what have we learned. I do believe it fosters kind of like joy and that customer centricity at the same time. Because if you look at that and say, okay, how do I actually get this result into where it will be my greatest strength as we grow or as we change, then it's not that bad anymore, is it? I'm happy to provide examples. This comes literally from failing a demo, which could devastate a company, or you could create a process that internally we call Guardian that came out of it and allowed us to way better QA and understand kind of like our customer experience as we ship anything out. Is it perfect? God, no, or we'll be done learning. But that's what I mean when I speak of learning and of turning failures into our best opportunities to learn. And I'll say we're not always great at that, and there's always more to be done.
Great, yeah, we can always improve. That's a growth mindset. Can you tell a little bit about how the Guardian process works as an example?
Sure. So I won't get into the details of what failed in the demo, but generally speaking, we could have dismissed that failed demo at the time as, you know, this thing didn't connect in the field. This was just a purchasing mistake and be done with it. But we chose to deep dive into all the steps from getting a device, and we do have a device under the hook, manufactured, shipped, tested in the field or before it got to the field. And we found that we had 17 other opportunities to avoid the mistake that eventually failed us. That's how we created the Guardian process to say, can we, at every step of the way, do the right testing, ask the right questions to make sure that at least 16 out of the 17 are actually under better control. And it keeps evolving because it's no longer 17. We now have probably hundreds of kind of like potential failures that we can and should catch. It's technically QA process, but with complex systems that are growing super fast, it's not really QA. It's understanding every step and points of failure in ways that extend beyond just, QA in code or manufacturing QA. That's kind of like cutting yourself some slack. But the emphasis is, don't just kind of like accept the final point of failure as the root cause for the failure. It really changed the way we operate.
It reminds me of a quote from John Dewey. He said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on an experience. Or we don't learn, an example, like another instance of that might be, we don't learn from mistakes, we learn from reflecting on mistakes. So you're not just saying, okay, it happened, we can move forward. You're actually analyzing the mistake and the root cause to see what can we learn from this and what can we do differently. And that, for the benefit of people here, that ties into the performance paradox, in that sometimes we think that with more experience we'll get better, but the experience and expertise are different things, and we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And that's what I'm hearing from Merab and from the other panelists here. Now, Merab, something that's amazing is Versatile has been a hyper growth company where at times you have quadrupled in less than a year. And so how you continue to build culture when there's so many people coming in, where you're quadrupling in less than a year? How do you maintain a strong culture and continue to deepen that culture when you're growing so quickly?
It's a great question. I'll generally say maybe I don't know either, right? Like, I'm still on the learning curve myself. I don't think we've done a perfect job, and we've had to correct some of our own mistakes as we went through that incredible journey. But if you look at it as a growth journey, then it's easier to recognize your mistakes, reflect on them, and actually correct them. Generally speaking, it's about choosing strong leaders, making sure that we do have a joint understanding of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and kind of like influencing that all the way down to anyone that joins the company. Strong values definitely help. As I said, like, we're still a relatively young company. We're still working on that and what that really should look like. But I have my sets that are extremely well established. And again, it needs to trickle into the rest of the leadership. And be mindful of the fact that you are growing so fast. Give yourself kind of like the benefit of the doubt. Allow yourself to appreciate mistakes and acknowledge them as well. I'll say, don't pretend everything is perfect when you know it's not, and just be okay with acknowledging and, again, with correcting any missteps in your journey.
Great. And there are some ways that you go about doing your interviews with leaders that are joining the company that are not that common. And I wonder if you can share some of those tips that have worked very well for you.
Sure. And I think one of the things I've shared in the past is just kind of like flipping the tables to where I allow candidates to ask me questions and I answer very candidly and directly. I find that to be such a great learning tool for me to understand the priorities and kind of like the mindset of those candidates. So that would be one of the things that most people don't do in interviewing processes, that you have your process and you just follow it. I really love, and I actually dedicate 90 minutes to that part of the process where people send me their questions and I spend the time, I ask them to prioritize, again, trying to learn what's important to them rather than prioritizing based on what's my comfort zone. So that's one of the things that I love the most. And I do ask kind of like, probably one of my first questions, like why we're having this conversation, as in not the regular, like I'm interested in the job, but why? Like, what is it about this company? What is it about this role that you're truly excited about? And what do you hope to achieve if you actually got this role? So.
Great. Last question I have for you is, I have heard you emphasize the importance of looking at things from other people's perspectives. And I wonder if you have an example of a time when you looked at something from somebody else's perspective, whether it was a colleague or a customer, that really made you, change your thinking?
Oh boy, yeah. So many of these that I can think of. I'll do a customer because I again honestly believe in kind of like understanding what the customer really feels or experiences. We had an instance where something just went wrong with the system. Again, that happens, especially when you have hardware, right? And the customer obviously wasn't extremely happy, and the team felt like it was getting slightly stressed over this. And my request was like, hey guys, let's put the hard hat on and just understand their experience or their perspective for just a second. There's a different way of looking at this situation, and the best way to look at it is probably from their perspective. It was easy enough to identify that we could, though we can't fix the actual problem, we could offer a different kind of like way to look at things, or a different solution, if you like, to that specific problem that actually met the need rather than the immediate concern or the things that broke for that customer. In this case, the screen was not presenting, but we could guarantee that they will get everything the next morning with, extra kind of like reporting, and all of that information is actually maintained. And honestly, the biggest concern for the customer, if you just flip it for them, was the fact that they wanted to know that their data was safe. So the black screen to them felt like lost data. For us, it was like no big deal. So just flipping it and understanding what it made them feel allowed us to communicate better, solve the real problem, and eventually, by the way, regain kind of like live feed as well. But it takes that ability to say, wait a minute, what is the real problem, or what is the real need? And it's an art, and we're still on the journey to make sure it's part of who we are and what we do in absolutely every occasion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Merav. I look forward to continuing the conversation when the four of us are together.
Same here.
Mariana Costa, like Linda and Merav, I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for joining us. Mariana has been an incredible leader in many ways, and a leader in Latin America. She's changing lives. She's changing entire regions. I met Mariana when we were both speaking at a panel at a conference, and I was so inspired by her. I just had to reach out to meet her and then to interview her for the book. She's been recognized as one of Peru's leading innovators by MIT, and one of the most influential women by the BBC. She's been on panels with Barack Obama and Mark Zuckerberg, and you'll hear about some of the amazing work that she's doing. So thank you, Mariana, for being here. Mariana is the co-founder and CEO of Laboratoria, which is a nonprofit based in Lima, operating throughout Latin America. And I want, Mariana, if you can share with us a little bit, when you and your partner first started Laboratoria, was that your plan? Did you have the vision for what you're doing now, or did you have a different vision, and how did you end up starting Laboratoria?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the invitation, Eduardo. Happy to be here and learn from these amazing stories. So we had lived many years in the US, and we're moving back to Peru after almost a decade. And we wanted to become social entrepreneurs. I had two co-founders. That was kind of the dream, but we had no idea how to get started. So we actually ended up starting a web development company. So we were doing websites for different clients. One of my co-founders, he was a programmer, and then me and the other one, we said, okay, we'll learn to sell and see how things go. And it was actually through building that first company that we came upon the opportunity for Laboratoria, because we realized that there was a huge talent gap in the tech sector. This was back in 2013, so very hard to find skilled web developers. Also, the world of software was a world with so many opportunities for inclusion, because it's one of the very few spaces where you can actually build an amazing career without necessarily having the university background from a good school. There's many self-made developers out there that do great for themselves. So we thought this is an interesting opportunity. And then the third thing is that there were very few women in the space back then. So in our first company, we started growing our team, and in a year, we hadn't even interviewed a single women developers. So we're like, what's going on? And that's how the idea came about. We said, okay, maybe we can do something to solve this problem, and we can actually build a program where we find talented women looking for better professional opportunities and train them to become web developers, and then help them get connected to amazing job opportunities that can be transformational for them, and at the same time transformational for the entire tech sector, no, in Latam. So yeah, it started elsewhere. Then we got there, and I think that since we got that vision, that was 2014. I'm actually always struck by how aligned we've remained to that mission. So many things have changed: how we train our students, where we train them, how they get placed, what companies they work in, what languages they learn. But at the core, the vision of empowering women that dream of a better future to build careers in tech has remained consistent.
That's great. And I think that might be tied to sometimes kind of great entrepreneurial ventures are based on a very strong insight. And so the strong insight that you had kind of has I think, in my view, kind of kept the opportunity, right? Kind of still kind of present 10 years later. At the same time, you've started recently Laboratoria Plus, which is to develop women. So I also see you kind of continuing to evolve and expand the work. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be 10 years since we started in 2024. So for the past year, we were reflecting, okay, what's next for us, no? Laboratoria has its plans to continue growing and to continue staying at the forefront of innovation, but we also felt there was space to do more. So we launched a new venture. It's called Laboratoria Plus. And it's interesting because it's kind of a continuation to Laboratoria. Our work has been very focused on accompanying women to start careers in tech. And we started thinking, and what about help them grow in those careers? No, so we took that insight. That's okay. I get my first job. That's amazing. 3-4 years down the line, how do I get to a leadership role? And what's the type of support that I need to continue growing and moving in that career path that I aspire to? So Laboratoria Plus is more of a professional development community for women. Then we also realized, okay, the challenge of growing in our careers, once we are in that mid-career phase, it's not only in tech, it's actually in every industry and every sector. So we've opened it to serve women across the board. And it's women that share first that ambition, in the right sense of the word, of thinking, I want to grow to a leadership role. I think I can do that. And we're trying to develop a community where they can find all they need to get there, the connections, the network, the skills, build the mindsets, the support system to go on and hopefully grow into leadership roles, and in that way grow their influence. And at the same time, through them, we want to be part of building a Latin America that has many, many more women in senior leadership roles across every industry.
Now, I want to point out to everybody here that I've been in Silicon Valley since 2000, on and off. I also spent a little time in Texas and in Mexico, but there was, for a long time, the assumption that hiring developers was really hard. And so companies just competed against each other for the same set of developers, and they just performed, as best as they could and as best as they knew how. And so it was really hard for them to hire the developers they wanted. It was very expensive. And what I see in Mariana and her colleagues is they said, okay, what if we leap into the learning zone? What if we can try to find a way to help bring more women and develop women to enter this? And just to talk a little bit about the outcomes of Laboratoria, the core program is a 6-month boot camp. And after that, women who had a job to begin with, which are the minority, more than almost triple their salaries. That's the impact that they have on their lives. And most of the women didn't have a job to begin with. So that's incredible impact that you're having on all these women, a lot of them coming from underserved backgrounds. Now, that's a huge impact you have on them. Are there other things that you think they are learning or getting out of the program that you think are important?
We always say that in our bootcamp, coding is really an excuse. Of course, it's a very valid excuse, right? Because it's what helps you actually get the job. But it's really much more of a very profound life experience where you decide to invest in yourself and to believe in yourself, and to believe that it's possible. And that means it's a pretty challenging experience in many ways, and that's woven in how they learn the technical skills. There's no formal classes. It's a lot of self-learning, a lot of community learning, a lot of reflection. So it's a program that really pushes you, but it pushes you from a place of empathy and trust. It's a culture where every single one of our students can be themselves fully. And they come from very diverse backgrounds, but they are all working hard towards the same goal, which is not to learn to code. It's really to go out and build the future that they want for themselves and for their families. So this means the experience is very transformational at many levels. There's also an important element of understanding that you are the owner of your learning journey. And you are kind of the master of your life in a way. How do you take control of that life and go out and build the habits that you need to build the community that you need to build, learn to approach learning from a different way, a way where you find love in that learning process, a way in which challenges are meaningful, and they're a signal that you're learning rather than something that scares you and that you want to run away of. So I think this is something that really transcends what happens in those 6 months, and it's something that stays with our students and our community for a very long time. And it's one of the things that companies value the most, because they're like, they're junior talent, they're entry level as alumni from any bootcamp. But what really stands out in the laboratoria community is that type of mindset, of taking things in your own hands and going for them with a lot of strength.
And the program is designed that way. You designed it with kind of design thinking principles and iteration, and it's not an instructor talking at the students taking notes. It's like a project-based learning approach where people from the beginning are working on projects and figuring out what they need to learn in order to get that project done, which is preparing them, as you're saying, for how they can act in the workplace to continue to improve throughout their lives. Now, the staff at Laboratoria, and this is my last question for you, also are learners and always continuing to improve the program. So how are some of the ways that you go about continuing to improve everything you do?
Yeah. There's a few interesting things. I think we are a very purpose and mission-driven organization. And our number one value as an organization is that our students are the reason why Laboratoria exists, right? They're the center. And that means that the people that we attract and the people that we hire are people that first are genuinely committed to the success of our students. And that's something that our students feel from day one. And when you feel that this person on the other end of the line truly wants the best for me, that also fosters an environment that promotes learning in so many ways. And then the other thing I would point out is that we have a very strong culture of designing with our students, getting feedback on a almost daily, weekly basis from our students on what's working, what is not working, what should we be doing differently, what can we try that suits you better. And they are actively part of that process. And I think that means that they feel the bootcamp they own it as well. It's not only, this other institution that is building all the rules and I'm just here and need to comply. It's a space where we want to make them feel that they're part of building the institution as well. Of course, there's many commitments and things that they have to comply with, but they are part of arriving to those common rules and culture. as well. So I think that has enabled an environment where our program is changing every day, and they are part of that change and feel part of it.
It makes me think about it as kind of the centricity on the people that you serve, whether it's your students or the customers that Merav talked about and that Linda talked about. The three of you talk about the importance of customer centricity and learning about your customers and putting yourself in their shoes. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, all of you. I'll turn it to Becky so that she can kind of set us up for our Q&A.
Yes, so we do want to welcome our other panelists back on camera with us, and we have some questions. But first, I do want to share a few insights for you if you're interested in learning more about Eduardo's new book. So we do not want you to miss out on some pre-order offers that are still in play for the next couple of weeks before the book officially launches on September 5th. So if you pre-order one copy of The Performance Paradox, you will receive from the publisher a bonus chapter on creating time and an invitation to an exclusive workshop with Eduardo, where he'll be teaching through all the concepts in the book. We also have some valuable bonus offers for those of you who may choose to buy the book in bulk for your organization. Wendy is putting all the links in the chat so you can find out more about those bonuses. And we would also love to have you mark your calendar so you can join with us to celebrate the launch of the book on the day of its release, which is Tuesday, September 5th, first day back in the office after the Labor Day weekend. And we are going to be kicking it off with this amazing celebration of Eduardo's new book. So we hope you'll join us for that special launch day celebration where you'll be face-to-face in a Zoom meeting with Eduardo and have the chance to speak with him and ask your questions in real time. So at this point, we are going to go to a couple of questions. I want to start with one that came in earlier on. And for some context, Wendy had put into the chat that whether within an organization or beyond, learning teams change the world. And we had a question from an attendee wondering, what does the term learning teams mean? What is a learning team?
Does anybody want to comment on what a learning team means to you? Linda, Merav, and Mariana? I can answer the question, but I want to invite you if you want to answer it.
I can go ahead, because I think it's super interesting, no? How the habit and the mindset of a learning then transfers to a team and then should transfer to a whole organization so that we can also build organizations that learn as part of their core values. And I think there's different elements. One that we talk about a lot at my work is just a mindset of continuous improvement. And I think someone mentioned this in the panel, no? I think it was the story about your dad, Linda, about how nothing that we do is ever finished, right? It's always a process of, especially if you're like in a product phase, of making it better and making it better, and what's the next iteration and what's the next feature. And this mindset of just like continuous improvement, I think drives learning as part of the day-to-day. Then I think feedback, it has also been mentioned, but how do we actually make feedback part of our day-to-day? I don't think that there can be learning if we don't have feedback loops properly integrated in all we do, from the small feedbacks that we get maybe after a particular session or a particular deliverable to deeper dives when we do our performance management 2, 3, 4 times a year, where we can actually get candid and honest feedback from also everyone around us, right? Our leaders, our peers, the people that report to us. So teams that actually live that feedback culture in their day-to-day, I think are always learning about themselves and about how to be better. And then maybe the last thing I would say is just, this is something that now I'm feeling a lot, like having fun while you're working. I think it's also a huge driver of learning. The fact that you enjoy the work that you're doing, what you're creating, what you're building, what you learn from this experiment or the other, that you feel that you're getting better as a team. I think that means that we enjoy the work that we do, and inherently, when you are enjoying yourself and trying new things, you're learning as well. So I would also point that out.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mariana. And we can kind of move to the next question so that we can answer more questions. But I just want to add that when people learn about the difference between the learning zone and the performance zone, most people realize, oh, I'm just spending all my time performing and I'm missing out on improving. But some people get the reverse. They realize, oh my God, I'm spending all my time learning and I'm not performing enough and I'm not contributing or getting enough done. And I just want to acknowledge that a learning team is not about just learning. It's about also performing and getting things done and increasing performance over time, because we care, right? Because we want to have that impact on our students or in our customers. And so a learning team is just a reminder that in order to get things done and continue to improve over time and deepen our relationships, get to know each other better, we need to also engage in learning, not just performing. Becky, do we have another question?
I do have a question. I'm wondering, Eduardo, referencing what you've just been speaking about balancing, we have to learn and we have to perform. What's your best advice if one of our attendees today is getting stuck in the performance paradox and only performing? What can we do to break free from that belief that we have to keep pleasing or we have to keep getting better and performing all the time instead of learning?
Linda, do you want to comment on that? Or I can if you don't want to.
Let's see. You comment first, and then I'll comment.
Okay, sounds good. And Marav, do you want to comment? I want to give you the opportunity to.
Once again, I would probably love to hear kind of like your comments first, and
Okay.
happy to chime in.
Sounds good. Yeah. So for each of us, I think one thing to think about is the question that you answered earlier today. It's like, if I could get better at anything, what would I improve? What's important to you? And then think about how could I get better at that thing that I care most about? Because trying to get better at everything is not really effective. Like it is useful to focus and to get clear on what's most important and what are we going to do to get better at those things. And then what are the habits that we want to build in order to get better at that? Trying to find something to get started, trying to get something that's easy and frequent rather than something that's hard and infrequent. So you're building the habit. And so a suggestion I have is to clarify, how do I want to engage in the learning zone all the time, ideally every day, and remind yourself of what that is every morning. So if you're reminding yourself of what that is, neurons are firing together, so they're going to be wiring together more. You're going to start thinking about this more and more automatically and easily. And over time, you'll find yourself in what I call learning while doing, so that while you are getting things done, you're learning along the way. You're getting both done at the same time. It just becomes the way you think. There's research that shows that for people who are more in the learning mode and in a growth mindset, when they're solving problems, they're paying more attention to what is surprising to them, the mistakes they're making, even though they're just solving problems, just like people more in a fixed mindset who are also solving problems, but not paying attention to their mistakes, so they're not learning as much. So that's a suggestion I have. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to add?
So I would say I ask myself and have asked myself all these years, what am I naturally good at? What can I lean into that I'm naturally good at? And what am I really not good at that I can either learn from others or delegate to others? So in our teams, we do at the end of a project. So we'll build a beautiful office space out for a corporation, a company. We get together at the end and we say, okay, what did we try on this project and that we really succeeded on? What did we try and we just couldn't get there? What are the lessons learned? And what are we going to take to the next project? So I think there's so many people they're so smart that they could do anything, but that's not what gives them joy. And what gives each of us the most joy is by doing what we're naturally good at and leaning into it and being honest with ourselves, having a true, honest conversation about our goals and our desires.
I'll quickly chime in and not just agree with Linda, like literally every word of it, but say it's about the goal setting. At least the addition that I would have is, if you have your mind kind of like set on a very clear goal, then you just start walking. And many times I would say to my teams, like, if you know where the summit is, take Mount Everest. You can't see the summit from where you're standing. but you have to start walking. You have to actually make it to base 1 and 2 and 3. And that's kind of like that constant improvement or that constant learning. Instead of being afraid of the summit and the fact that you can't sit, just start walking, but never get stuck with like, my shoe hurts, I don't have enough sunscreen, do we have enough water? Just start walking, right? And I love that analogy, because you really can't see the summit if you're climbing from where you start. You never can.
Thank you. Yeah, and when people think about goals, think about kind of performance goals. What do you want to achieve? But also learning goals. What do you want to kind of learn and get better at over time? And as Linda said, if we can think about what gives us joy and what we want to become great at, and also what do we want to delegate? How do we want to collaborate with others? So that the highest level goals of how do we work together and how do we achieve together, like how do we get better at that, rather than how do I get better at the specific thing that might not be the best thing for me to focus on. Becky, do you want to do another one, or?
I'm going to take one more. So there's a question here from Allison, and she's wondering, Linda, if you could please say more about how you use the learning zone to shift away from the tendency to please others to being a strong female business leader. And if I could, I have a question too that I want to add on for you, Linda. You talked about doing those things that we're naturally good at. And I'm curious how you discovered which ones were yours, because I heard you say that you never took a business class or an accounting class. So how did you discover those things that were your true strengths? If you can answer all of that.
I discovered that I was really good at collaboration. I discovered that I was really very disciplined. Being successful in business is not the tenets. There are thousands of books written about how to be successful in business. It's not that it's not that you can't figure out how to be successful. It's the discipline of doing it. And as Eduardo said, getting up every morning and thinking about what you need to do and doing it day after day until it doesn't work, and then finding another way to do it. And I realized that I was just very strategic. I could think in ways that other people weren't thinking. They would say the problem was over here, and I'd say, no, the problem is really over there. And then I'd end up leading the organization. So the disease to please is really wonderful as long as you allow yourself to have your own voice. And I had to find my own voice. What was my voice? How did I want to project myself to the world, and how did I want the world to see me? What were the things that were really valuable to me, that I really valued as I was living my life? And so when I got breast cancer, I decided then that I was going to live the rest of my life, not knowing how long it was, with as few regrets as possible. And I would challenge everyone to think about that, and what you need to learn and what you need to do and how you need to comport yourself in order to have the fewest regrets possible and live a life really well spent.
Thank you, Linda. That's beautiful. And you reminded me a couple of things when you were talking. One of the things that you do in the morning is you spend about an hour reading, and you share those things with other people who you think could benefit from that or find it interesting. You talked about how you're perceived in the world, and one of the moments in your life where that kind of changed for you is you were a successful leader, and you were with other CEOs. And you got feedback saying, hey, Linda, I keep hearing from you that you are the underdog, but you're not the underdog anymore. It's coming across as inauthentic. You're super successful. And that was a big aha moment for you. Were saying, wow, like I always had this idea of being the little engine that could and that drove me, that motivated me, but now that's coming across as inauthentic. So now I need to really own my success. And so how we are perceived in the world, what our identity is, what our view of ourselves is, whether it is as an underdog or then an executive or now like a mentor and a contributor to others, is about evolving in our lives, as you all have done and continue to do, and continue to support so many people in doing, including the people in your organizations and in other organizations. I am so inspired by the three of you, and thank you so much for being here today, because it's such a gift to be able, I mean, we can read these stories in the book, but it's so special to be able to listen and to go dive deeper with you at real time. So thank you for that.
It makes me want to go back and read those sections of the book again. So as we're wrapping up today, we want to make sure that you also have the links to the very special offers for a pre-order of one book, that bonus chapter on creating time, and a special invitation to an exclusive workshop with Eduardo. Wendy's also going to give you the link if you want to buy this book in bulk for your organization to help those in your organization become learners as well as performers. And again, one more reminder of that exciting launch day celebration coming up on September 5th at noon Eastern. So as we wrap up the hour, Eduardo, I know you have some parting thoughts for us.
Sure. I mean, I would reflect that the performance paradox leads us to work hard at getting things done. And for me, for a long time in my career, I was doing what I thought society expected of me. Like, just for example, just focusing on getting good grades or getting a high paying job. So I ended up working investment banking and venture capital, which is great for people who want to do that. But I realized at some point, like, that wasn't giving me joy, like Merav and Mariana and Linda talked about. And I didn't feel like I was contributing to other people. I thought, like, if I worked in that job or not, great companies like Merav's were going to be funded, whether I was there or not. So what was I actually doing for other people? And it took kind of leaping into the unknown, leaping into the learning zone, right, in order to really completely change my life and my experience of life. And we've heard that from all of the panelists today. Linda was kind of living her parents' vision for herself until she started developing her own vision and starting kind of shaping herself. And she went through so many ups and downs that we didn't even touch upon. If you want to learn more about Linda, there's a great Partnering Leadership podcast episode on her by our common friend, Mahan Tavakoli. We heard from Merav. I mean, she was working in the corporate world before she started Versatile, and that was a leap into the unknown to see, she saw an opportunity to make job sites safer and more efficient. And that went into leaping in the unknown, and that's something that becomes part of the habit that everybody engages in Versatile, because that's what needed in order to innovate and in order to change the world. And that's exactly what Mariana did too. When it was hard for them to hire developers, rather than compete with other companies to hire more male developers, they thought, is there something that we can do to bring in female developers into this industry and to be able to support them and give them an opportunity to change their lives? And the increasing salary that they're having is not even the most important thing that they're learning. They're learning kind of a way to live that's going to be more fulfilling, where they can pursue any goal that they want to pursue. So that's the performance paradox, and that's what breaking the performance paradox entails, is doing something other than just getting things done. So thank you again for Linda, Merav, and Mariana for being here today. Thank you for all you do. And I know you're super busy, so thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely our pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having us.